His wife, Maggie, and his youngest son, Paul, shot dead on their huge low country estate, Moselle.
Yeah.
Just a scene of unbelievable violence tearing through that quiet, moss-draped silence down there.
It really was. And this wasn't just some isolated family tragedy, horrific as it was.
Yeah.
This was really the bloody, very dramatic unraveling of an entire dynasty.
Exactly, a dynasty. For generations, the Murdaugh name meant power, legal authority, influence, especially in that part of South Carolina.
Absolutely synonymous with it.
Yeah.
But this event, the murders, it wasn't just a personal catastrophe. It was the moment that name, that facade, began to be fully exposed, pulling back the curtain on this profound web of deceit, of death that had been concealing decades of hidden stuff starting to come out.
Right. So let's unpack this whole thing. Our mission today really is to cut through all the noise surrounding the Murdaugh murders. Because this isn't just some local crime story, is it? It's this huge saga of power, incredible greed, and just staggering violence. It shook the legal landscape of South Carolina to its absolute core, but it also, captured national attention for years. So we'll be digging into the source material you shared, trying to understand not just what happened, but maybe why it keeps echoing, why there are still so many unsettling questions,
Right.
revealing these systemic vulnerabilities. This deep dive, it's really designed to give you the most crucial, sort of distilled insights from what is an incredibly complex story.
And we're going to explore how a name that was once seen as, well, almost untouchable, right? How it could become so deeply tangled up in this horrifying web of criminal activity. Layer after layer just kept getting revealed, showing a narrative far, far darker than anyone initially imagined. It's really a study in how unchecked power can just corrode everything from the inside out.
Just imagine, if you can, a family so powerful, so deeply entrenched in their region that their name was basically law. For nearly a century, the Murdaugh family held this undisputed sway over South Carolina's 14th Judicial Circuit. That's 5 counties.
A huge area.
Yeah, 3 generations of Murdaugh men served as the elected the chief prosecutor, an incredibly powerful position.
Immense authority.
It wasn't just politics, it was this legacy. It commanded huge respect, sure, but also, for a lot of people, this real sense of fear and, critically, this perception of impunity. The roles didn't quite apply.
Yeah, and what's immediately apparent when you look into this is just how deep and pervasive that power was. It really makes you question the inherent dangers, doesn't it, of that kind of unchecked, localized power, especially when legal authority stays in one family for generations.
Right.
It creates this whole ecosystem where accountability can just, slide. A sense of entitlement can grow, and you get this massive gap between how things look and how they really are.
A century. It's hard to wrap your head around.
Nearly a century. It just underscores how ingrained that control became in the Low Country.
And it was that very impunity, that feeling of being untouchable that eventually, slowly but surely, started to crack. Our sources definitely tell us that by 2021, that meticulously built image, that impenetrable facade, it was really starting to show some serious fissures.
Indeed. It seems like the weight of all the hidden actions, the secrets, it can only be carried for so long, right, before it just breaks through. You have these subtle shifts, maybe in public perception, combined with pressures, internal issues, external scrutiny piling up. It suggests this slow erosion of that image that's so carefully maintained.
Yeah.
And that crumbling foundation really set the stage for the dramatic unraveling that followed. But it didn't start with the murders, did it?
No, not at all. It started with an incident that brought the first major public challenge to their influence. And this is where it gets really unsettling and just tragically, where the first undeniable major red flag pops up. The first tremor before the earthquake. February 24th, 2019. Paul Murdaugh, Alex's son, 22 at the time, he's drunkenly piloting the family boat. It's dark, these winding waterways in Beaufort County. And the night just turns into an absolute nightmare. The boat, overloaded with 6 young people, slams hard into a bridge piling.
It's just horrific.
And the outcome was immediate, devastating. 19-year-old Mallory Beach was thrown into that dark, cold water.
Oh, God.
And her body, just heartbreakingly, wasn't found for a whole week, despite massive search efforts.
That incident, it wasn't just a terrible accident. It really was the initial tremor that foreshadowed the whole collapse of the Murdaugh empire.
Yeah.
It exposed, really for the first time on such a public stage, the potential for privilege to just sidestep justice.
Yeah.
The elements that immediately raised red flags. Paul's intoxication, which was confirmed later, right?
Yeah.
Blood alcohol, 3 times the legal limit.
3 times.
Combine that with the fatal outcome, it brought intense public and investigative scrutiny onto the family. It challenged that long-held image of being untouchable.
It really did.
It forced people to start asking, wait, do the rules apply to everyone? Or is there a different standard for the Murdaughs?
And it became pretty clear pretty fast that the Murdaugh name still carried a lot of weight. Paul faced serious charges, BUI causing death. But the word on the street, which sources and later investigations confirmed, was that the Murdaugh machine was working overtime.
The infamous machine.
Whispers got louder, and there were these immediate, really disturbing allegations, not just rumors. Claims that Paul Murdaugh was sort of shielded at the hospital, maybe allowed to be alone with family before law enforcement could properly question him.
That's a huge red flag right there.
Huge. Crucial blood evidence from the boat was apparently mishandled. And chilling reports that some people at the scene were pressured, to change their initial stories to make Paul look less responsible.
Wow.
It wasn't just abstract influence. It felt like alleged manipulation of evidence of witnesses right from the get-go, suggesting just how deep their reach went into the system they dominated for so long.
And that really makes you ask, what does it mean for the rule of law? When you hear these whispers, these direct allegations suggesting some families just operate differently, actively undermining investigations.
Right.
The alleged use of influence, power, maybe illicit means to protect family. Disappearing evidence, changing testimonies.
Yeah.
It just destroys public trust. You have to wonder what kind of systemic power allows that kind of interference, and what are the long-term effects on a community's faith in its own institutions. This wasn't just isolated. It was the first major public challenge to their control, showing that facade starting to fracture under real pressure. The very institutions they'd built up seemed to be bending to their will, right out in the open.
Yeah, the boat crash was definitely a tremor, a serious warning sign. But the murders of Maggie and Paul on June 7th, 2021, that was the earthquake.
Absolutely.
This was the central tragedy that just ripped through the Lowcountry and blew the whole Murdaugh saga wide open. Maggie and Paul found dead near the dog kennels on their massive estate, Moselle. 1,770 acres.
Huge property.
And the details were just brutal, deliberate, both shot execution style. Paul with a shotgun, Maggie with an assault rifle.
The nature of those killings, the specific weapons, different for each victim, close range. It instantly signaled this wasn't random violence.
No way.
Not a simple dispute gone wrong. It screamed intent, a terrifying level of intent. It suggested a premeditated act, completely different from the accidental nature of the boat crash. And it just intensified the focus, didn't it, on the family, especially given Alex Murdaugh's immediate, very public story.
Oh, yeah.
The scene itself spoke volumes about a calculated, targeted attack. Made it clear this was going to be a complex criminal investigation right from the start.
And Alex's story right out of the gate was that he was miles away, visiting his ailing mother, her caretaker, at the time the murders happened.
The alibi.
Exactly. He presented himself as the distraught family man, the grieving husband and father, openly weeping for the cameras, this very public display of sorrow.
A performance.
It seemed like it. A powerful performance. Designed, it felt like, to control the narrative, get sympathy, and lock down that alibi, placing him far from Moselle.
But, critical thinkers, and especially experienced detectives, they always look past the performance, don't they? Past the emotional displays.
You have to.
The fact that investigators on the ground spotted inconsistencies almost immediately, that tells you a lot. There were red flags in his account right away. His grief, while it looked overwhelming, maybe seemed to lack certain natural reactions. Details in his story shifted, subtly, over time. So you immediately have this conflict, appearance versus reality. The story Alex wanted the world to believe versus the objective facts law enforcement started painstakingly digging up.
Yeah.
It put his whole account under a microscope right away. Question of the grief, sure, but more importantly, the truth of his alibi, setting the stage for this dramatic showdown with the truth later on.
So as the investigation really got going, detectives started digging deep, and the questions about Alex's story just piled up fast. Why did he lie so strongly about being at the kennels that night? He told investigators again and again, I was never there, said he went to his mom's, came back, found the bodies.
But the evidence started pointing elsewhere.
Exactly. And what about Paul's phone? It had been silent for hours before the murders. Then suddenly, weirdly, it becomes active at the murder scene just minutes after the killings were estimated to have happened. How does that happen?
That's a huge inconsistency.
And then there was the shirt. The shirt Alex was wearing when police first arrived. looked clean, pristine, but forensic analysis later found microscopic gunshot residue on it.
And not just from handling a gun, right?
Right, from being near a gun when it was fired.
These aren't just minor slip-ups, not simple memory lapses. They're direct contradictions.
Yeah.
And they systematically started dismantling any plausible, innocent story he was trying to tell. Painted a very different, much more sinister picture.
Definitely.
Each inconsistency, the phone activating right after, the gunshot residue on his clothes, just chipped away at that carefully built alibi. It really highlights the kind of pressure someone must be under to create such a detailed but ultimately really fragile and inconsistent story, and how the smallest details, when investigators dig in, can unravel everything. The cumulative effect of all these little pieces, they started pointing towards a deliberate deception, moving from just suspicion to actual concrete evidence against him.
And this is the moment the whole case just completely turned on its head. It was the sledgehammer the prosecution was looking for. A single irrefutable piece of evidence that just shattered Alex's whole fabricated story. The most damning evidence came from Paul himself. A Snapchat video recorded on his phone just minutes before he died at the kennels.
Right before.
And in the background of that video, clear as day, Alex Murdaugh's voice.
It's really incredible, isn't it, how often the simplest thing, something overlooked, like a voice in the background of a phone video, becomes the ultimate truth teller. Just irrevocably exposing these elaborate lies. Technology right there played this pivotal, undeniable role. It provided an objective record that no amount of denial, no emotional manipulation, no carefully built alibi could possibly overcome.
Totally undeniable.
The power of that specific piece of evidence, you just can't overstate it. It was a complete game changer. Fundamentally shifted the investigation, and ultimately, you have to think, secured the conviction. It put Alex right there at the scene exactly when he claimed he was miles away. Dismantled his entire defense with one single audio clip from his own son's phone.
And then, as if things weren't already spiraling, just 3 months after Maggie and Paul are murdered, the spotlight's intensifying, investigations into his life are broadening. Alex Murdaugh does something just astonishing.
Yeah, bizarre is the word.
He stages his own shooting on some lonely roadside in Hampton County. He actually arranged for a former client, a distant cousin, Curtis Eddie Smith, to shoot him in the head.
It's hard to fathom.
It was such a bizarre, desperate, calculated act, hard to square with the image, the respected attorney image, a premeditated, self-inflicted scheme designed to look like a botched suicide attempt.
And that's the key question, right? What kind of immense pressure leads someone, especially someone like Alex Murdaugh, seemingly so composed, so influential, to such an extreme and frankly poorly executed plan?
Yeah, it didn't work out well.
No, this wasn't random violence against him. It was highly calculated, even if botched. An attempt to manipulate circumstances even further. It really revealed a mind under just immense duress, but maybe from a different kind of crisis boiling beneath the surface.
Totally.
It wasn't self-defense, wasn't an accident. It was this premeditated scheme, sources suggest, trying to distract from his financial ruin. And maybe, just maybe, secure that massive life insurance payout for his surviving son, Buster.
$10 million.
The sheer audacity, the desperation of it just laid bare how deep his predicament really was.
But why? Why go to such extreme lengths? Our sources make it crystal clear. His entire financial house of cards wasn't just crumbling, it was exploding right around him. The driving force behind that staged shooting, that desperate act, was the fact that Alex's decades-long pattern of financial crimes was about to be fully exposed.
The walls were closing in.
Completely. He was grasping at this desperate gambit, the $10 million life insurance policy for Buster, hoping to leave him something before the full extent of his stealing came out.
It happens so often, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The scrutiny into one crime, the murders, pulls back the curtain on this much larger web of deceit. In this case, profound financial malfeasance.
A staggering amount. He'd stolen $8.8 million.
And if you connect that to the bigger picture, it just highlights how deeply tangled all the threads of this saga are. The violence at Moselle, the staged shooting, the unraveling. It all seems to stem from, or at least escalate alongside, this massive crisis of financial crime.
Yeah.
Forensic accountants got involved, part of the broader investigation, and they started uncovering this complex web. Shell companies, diverted funds, outright theft.
And the $8.8 million, it wasn't just from, anonymous corporate clients, was it?
No, that's the chilling part. It was often from people who were supposed to trust him the most. His clients, often vulnerable ones. It revealed this pattern of profound betrayal that went way beyond his own family.
It really transforms the story, doesn't it? It's not just murder. It's steeped in this systemic, pervasive financial corruption that had been going on right under everyone's noses for years.
Right, in plain sight.
But it gets even worse. I mean, if you can believe it gets worse.
It's hard to imagine.
He wasn't just stealing from any clients. He was stealing from the very people he claimed to care for. People already suffering, already vulnerable. In the most tragic situations, look at the sons of Gloria Satterfield. She was the Murdaugh's longtime housekeeper. Died in 2018 after what was called a trip and fall accident at Moselle. The same property.
Unbelievable.
And then, with this just shocking lack of any moral compass, Alex Murdaugh tells her grieving family to sue him for insurance money, supposedly to provide for her sons.
Okay.
But then, in an act of just unimaginable betrayal, he steals every single penny of their $4.3 million settlement, every cent.
What kind of ethical void allows someone, especially a lawyer, entrusted with power, seen as a community pillar, to exploit that kind of deep vulnerability, that profound grief for personal gain?
It's sickening.
Stealing from people already suffering, especially people close to his family like Gloria Satterfield's sons. Or even, as sources indicate, the family of Mallory Beach, the young woman killed in Paul's boat crash. He stole settlement money from them too.
He did.
It just reveals this profound, disturbing lack of a moral compass. It's a level of betrayal that's just hard to wrap your head around.
Yeah.
And it cements these sinister undercurrents, indicating this wasn't new. It was a long-standing pattern of criminal behavior hidden behind respectability.
So after all the twists, the turns, the shocking revelations, the dramatic trial testimony, including Alex Murdaugh taking the stand himself, denying everything.
Right, that was quite a moment.
The truth finally caught up. Early 2023, the jury comes back with their verdict. They saw through the tears, through the performance, through all the elaborate lies. They convicted him, murderers of Maggie and Paul, 2 consecutive life sentences. It was just a monumental moment for the Lowcountry, for South Carolina, for everyone watching across the nation. That perceived impunity of the Murdaugh name finally shattered.
And that conviction, it wasn't just, a legal outcome. It felt like a profound public declaration that even the most powerful names, the ones people thought were above the law, beyond reach, they were subject to its authority.
Absolutely.
That moment where his impunity finally ended was such a crucial turning point for justice in the Lowcountry. It signaled that accountability could and would be served. It said a powerful message, didn't it? That no one, regardless of name, wealth, influence, is above the law. It reinforces the idea that even these deeply entrenched power structures can be dismantled when the truth gets exposed and pursued like that.
So Alex is in prison now, 2 life sentences for killing his wife and son. But for so many people, there's this huge question still just hanging in the Lowcountry air, like that Spanish moss,
Yeah.
Did he really act alone?
Ah, that question.
Despite the conviction, the sheer complexity of the Murdaugh network, the pervasive nature of all the other illicit stuff that came out, the scale of the financial crimes, it just keeps fueling speculation. Were there accomplices? Co-conspirators? Was Alex the sole architect, or just the most visible piece of a much larger, more entrenched system?
And that question, it's not just idle curiosity, is it? It reflects the deep complexity of this whole saga. So many illicit activities were exposed across so many different areas. Legal manipulation alleged, the huge financial crimes, the scale and the duration of the deception, it naturally leads people to wonder about broader involvement.
Right.
It pushes you to consider, was he the lead actor or part of something bigger? A system of malfeasance that operated with the knowledge, maybe even the complicity of others. The pattern of behavior revealed throughout all investigations just makes it hard for a lot of people to believe he operated entirely in a vacuum.
And then there's that lingering, chilling shadow of Gloria Satterfield's death. We mentioned her, the longtime housekeeper, died in 2018, trip and fall at Moselle. Years later, 2023, her body is exhumed. And after further investigation, the cause of death, officially ruled undetermined.
And that ruling undetermined, that is incredibly significant. It takes what seemed like an accidental death, something accepted at face value before.
Yeah, for years.
And turns it into another potential crime scene right there in the Murdaugh orbit, demanding much more intense scrutiny. Especially given Alex's later theft, the undeniable theft, of her family's multi-million-dollar settlement. That undetermined ruling strongly suggests, well, you can't rule out foul play.
No.
It adds yet another profound layer of dark mystery, potential criminality to this whole story. It forces you to re-examine everything you thought was simple or straightforward about this family's history. It highlights a pattern, doesn't it? Suspicious deaths seeming to follow financial wrongdoing.
And if that weren't enough, there's the Stephen Smith case.
Another one.
His body, 19 years old, found on a rural road back in 2015, years before the Moselle murders. His death was initially ruled a hit and run. Seemed tragic, maybe, but kind of open and shut. But then the Murdaugh investigation blows wide open, reveals the depth of their alleged corruption, their influence. And suddenly, the Stephen Smith case officially reopened. And here's where it gets really disturbing. Texts came out suggesting Stephen allegedly had a secret relationship with Buster Murdaugh, Alex's surviving son.
Wow.
Which immediately raised that chilling question in the Low Country. Was he silenced?
And this prompts a much broader question, doesn't it? When one investigation uncovers such a pervasive pattern of deceit, potential criminality within one powerful family, how many other seemingly unrelated cases might actually be connected, tied into that central web of power and influence?
It makes you wonder.
The alleged relationship with Buster, combined with that suspicious initial hit-and-run ruling, which apparently many locals never really bought,
Right.
it naturally sparks these profound questions about possible Murdaugh involvement or maybe a cover-up in yet another death. It just underscores the impact that a network like that can have on individuals, even outside the immediate family, and on the integrity of the justice system itself. It leaves open this possibility that there are still many more truths buried in the long shadow of this dynasty.
So, yeah, while Alex Murdaugh sits in prison serving his time for the murders, the story is absolutely far from over. Our sources confirm dozens of lawsuits, investigations still active, ongoing.
Still unfolded.
Millions of dollars still missing, unaccounted for, maybe gone forever, stolen from vulnerable people. And most importantly, families are still grieving, still searching for answers, for accountability, trying desperately to find some measure of peace that was just stolen from them by years of lies and betrayal.
And that's such an important insight here. The conviction, while a major step, a pivotal moment, it's not the conclusion, is it?
Not at all.
It's this ongoing process. Legal accountability, trying to recover finances, maybe eventually some kind of restorative justice. It underscores how widely the consequences ripple out, impacting so many victims, their families directly. Far beyond the initial headlines, the legal and financial aftermath just keeps unfolding, revealing the long-term damage of such a corrupt, abusive system on a whole community.
And in that moss-draped silence of the Low Country, the question that really seems to grip people, according to our sources, that haunting question is, who else knew? Who else enabled all this?
And that final thought, it really embodies the core of critical thinking about this whole saga. It pushes us beyond the conviction, beyond Alex Murdaugh himself, to think about the broader systemic issues, the hidden truths that might still be lurking in the shadows, waiting to come to light.
Yeah.
It's an evocative image, isn't it? It summarizes that lingering uncertainty, that pervasive feeling that the Murdaugh story goes far beyond just Alex. It suggests a deeper, maybe unspoken complicity or knowledge within the community, its institutions, that hasn't been fully revealed yet. The whispers persist because the patterns just seem too ingrained, too extensive maybe, to be the work of one man alone.
We've really journeyed through an extraordinary unraveling today, haven't we? We've seen how decades of unchallenged power, unchecked influence, this perceived impunity, how it can just set the stage for unthinkable events.
Yeah.
We've watched how one tragic accident, that boat crash, could unexpectedly start to unravel a family's darkest secrets. And we've seen how crucial details, like a voice on a smartphone video and just relentless investigation, can ultimately expose the devastating truth. Even after years of these carefully built lies, we've really peeled back the layers of this dynasty that commanded respect, fear, apparent immunity, only to watch its spectacular, bloody, and frankly thoroughly deserved unraveling.
So what does this all mean? For you, for us, looking at this incredibly complex, disturbing story. The Murdaugh saga, it really forces us to confront this uncomfortable truth, doesn't it? That sometimes the most profound darkness, the deepest corruption, can hide right behind the brightest facades. Facades of power, respectability, community standing.
It's chilling.
It raises a really important question for all of us, I think. Given how long the Murdaugh family held that kind of power and the sheer extent of the staggering crimes uncovered, what does this whole story reveal about the vulnerabilities? The vulnerabilities of trust, of accountability within any close-knit community? And how might similar hidden dynamics exist, maybe even in plain sight around us, just waiting for their own carefully maintained facades to crack?
Wow. A lot to think about there, a lot to unpack, and certainly, yeah, a chilling reminder of just how deep those shadows can run. We really hope this deep dive has given you a comprehensive shortcut, a way to be truly well informed on what is just a captivating and deeply, deeply unsettling story.